Yeah,
And
yeah.
hi.
Hi, hello. So we're discussing scent. Um,
Right.
and you just read out um, a passage from what is called thinking.
Yes.
And we are looking now at a passage from what the introduction to metaphysics, where Heidegger is
Hmm.
talking about the being of beings. Heidegger is talking about the being of individual entities. And just like that, without any real reason, he talks about the bill about a school.
Hmm.
Um, so this is what he says. In addition, the being of this building does not at all seem to be identical for everyone. So everyone has a different
Hmm.
sense of this being. For us, as observers or passers by, it is not what it is for the students who sit inside. So the students who sit inside have a different sense. People who are like walking by have a different sense, not just because they see it only from the inside, but because for them, this building really is what it is and how it is. I don't know yet what that means, but he
Hmm.
will explore that. So then he says, and this is the interesting part. Let me just also um, maybe highlight. Okay, it's already. All right. So here he's saying one can, as it were, smell the being of such buildings. One
Right.
can smell the being of such buildings.
Hmm.
And often, after decades, one still has the scent in one's nose. The scent provides the being of this being much more directly and truly than it could be communicated by any description or inspection. So the scent gives it much more truly. On the other hand, the subsistence of the building does not depend on the scent that is hovering around somewhere. And then he moves on. As I said, he unfortunately goes on to other things. He no longer talks about the scent, except maybe mentioning it once more as an example. But I wish that have I wish that he went more into this idea of scent providing the being of the being, which is kind
Right.
of like what we are talking about. So
Exactly. But that's a really great passage
yeah.
um, for the our purposes. And the way in which it's how did he put it just then?
Oh, so he's saying
Basically
that,
the idea that it's the most the scent is what really gives you the essence, right?
yeah.
Of what the building is. Um,
Yes.
so
And so I'll just put that in the inspection. That's what it is. This is the scent provides the being of this building in this case, much more directly and truly. So it's
mhm,
more direct and true than it could be communicated by any description or inspection. So the scent is the deepest, uh, deepest encounter of being in this sense.
right,
So
right.
yeah. So
And
the
so
dis
to go with it, I was going to try to pull up and share that other passage that we were talking about
right smell
from
scent distinction is interesting. We could
right.
we
So
could
smelling and scenting are two different things, right? So, let's say all scenting includes
involve
smelling,
right,
right? Includes smelling, but not all smelling is scenting,
right, right,
right?
right.
Um, I think that would be a good way to formulate it. And then, yeah, so I'm going to share that page real quick if you give me access to do that.
Oh yeah. Right.
Um, and then we'll just look at that for a second. But so yeah, so while you're giving me that, so this whole thing is about, what's in terms of senses and in terms of modalities of meaning and communication, what is really primary, or what do we think Heidegger is saying about what is most primary. And so we started out with this thing about there's classic sort of, as you we put it, that certainly from Plato, it seems like Western idea about vision. The appearance is what we can see, seeing is believing. And, the whole thing about vision and all of that is primary. And the way in which text and some of Heidegger's stuff clearly calls that into question. And even pre-Socratics, we could say, call that into question somewhat. Certainly, like we mentioned, how the seers in the tragedies are blind, right? So it's not the case that vision is always primary,
Yes.
but also what is thinking, right? Thinking can be pictures, right? I can think about things in its images, or mostly people think of thinking as words. And Heidegger also seems to want to challenge that. And in a sense of, at least, and that's kind of in this passage I'm about to share, that there's something that must precede any sort of linguistic capture, if there's actually to be anything of meaning there. And then, talking about the Greek terminology as well. So let's go there real quick. Tell me if you can see
Yes,
that screen.
I can
I
see.
know it's
Yeah.
got all this other stuff on it, but so yeah, this is what is called thinking. And so if speaking about Noyen and Legain in this passage up here, this
Hmm.
fuller passage, right? And that's the one you and I were talking about before. And so there's the letting lie before us, right? The Noyen. And he says this word Noyen does not originally mean thinking, anymore does the term Legain.
Hmm.
The two have become joined in the closest kinship only by virtue of their original nature, and are later reduced to what logic transacts as the essence of thinking.
Mm.
Noyen implies a perceiving which never was nor is a mere receiving of something. So that sentence alone is actually really good just to set apart and give the reflection to.
Right.
So Noyen implies a perceiving which never was nor is a mere receiving of something,
Mm.
right? So, well, like, what is it then? It's a perception, but it's not a receiving of something. The Noyen perceives beforehand by taking to mind and heart. So here's where we start to, I'm sure the, positivist type people, whoever start get their knickers in a twist here. But this is where I think you can see the mysticism a little bit, right?
Right.
There's clearly a meaning here, but he is, using this kind of language about the heart,
One,
right?
right, one interesting way in which he explains this, at least in the introduction to metaphysics, is that he tells the class that right now we heard a motorbike go by,
Mm-hmm.
and we heard it, but what did we hear? We didn't hear the decibels in terms of sound. We heard the whole motorbike.
Right.
So so it's that I think that's also a kind of taking to heart in that it's not this sort of positivistic reception of data, which then the brain
Right. Very
uses to
good.
construct an image. It's
Right.
a kind of transposition of ourselves or of the thing in a world. So a person who has never heard a motorbike before
Mm-hmm.
might understand that sound in a very different way. But after, like, because we kind of know what it is, we can, we don't hear the sound at all. We hear the motorbike, the whole
Right.
thing, just like a sheep would hear danger when a wolf is making a noise or something like that.
Right.
The entire thing is taken in
Exactly.
rather than individual points of information or bits of
Right.
information. I think that's the
Exactly.
distinction, I guess, with the mind and heart versus just the sense
Right. No, that's
organs.
I think a great way to understand it. The next line is good too. The heart is the wardship guarding what lies before us, though this wardship itself needs that guarding, which is accomplished in the legain as gathering. So there is, what you
Mm.
were describing kind of makes sense with this notion of the gathering, because, this isolated sound, if you will, like you pointed out, if you had never heard that, it would be isolated, it would be unfamiliar, you wouldn't really make sense of it. But when it's all occurring organically, if you will, right,
Yes.
there's something happening such that it can have this. I mean, obviously, we can ignore it. A lot of people tune things out, right?
Mm.
But if we're attuned, right, when we do perceive, it's more of the perception of something much larger than this isolated noise. Now, he says there that nous, therefore, does not originally signify what later develops into reason. This is what we were talking about originally that got us
Yeah.
off on the whole scenting. Nous signifies the minding that has something in mind and takes it to heart.
Mm.
So see, it's more of a holistic process. He says this thus noyen also means what we understand by scenting, though we use the word mostly of animals in nature. And then
Mm.
here's the great one of the most amazing sections ever. Man scenting is divination. But since by now we understand all knowledge and all skill in terms of the thinking of logic, we measure divination by that same yardstick. But
Uh,
the word means more. Authentic divination is the mode in which essentials come to us and so come to mind, in order that we may keep them in mind. This kind of divination is not the outer court before the gates of knowledge. It is the great hall where everything that can be known is kept concealed.
mm.
So we translate noyen as take to heart. So yeah.
Wonderful. That's so beautiful. I was wondering if we modern people just don't understand what it means to ward or guard knowledge because we use all sorts of devices where you don't have to do that. You can
Mm.
simply forget. You don't need the who are the gods of memory, the
Nimosine?
Memos, we don't need them because that has been outsourced by us to technology. And so
Right,
we don't need to guard our knowledge. We don't need to be guardians of the essentials that Heidegger is
right.
talking about. But when you were reading that passage, I was thinking of people like Homer, who is a poet and therefore not that distant from divination. But I was just thinking of how they have to guard this event which has happened and which has shaped their civilization, and they have to guard that and pass that on
Right.
to the next generation. And for us, modern contemporary people, it makes less sense what he's talking about when he's talking about the guardianship and the wardship of knowledge. But if we imagine ourselves into the past, for example, if we imagine ourselves to be in the time of Homer or even Plato, we can see what that means. We can see what it means to guard something,
Right.
because we are in the sea of information where we don't have to guard anything. We just,
Hmm.
in fact, it's becoming almost clinically impossible for us to retain things, to maintain our attentions, but so yeah, that's how he he understands. That's how I understand what he's talking about when he's talking about taking something to heart, to
Right.
make it
Right.
part of your
Yes.
being in that sense. Ancient
Hmm.
people were capable of that much, much, much more. Uh,
Right. And certainly people with an oral tradition, right?
yeah,
And
yes.
um, maintaining, safeguarding the knowledge and such through those oral traditions. It makes me think of some articles I've read, whether for or against or whatever the position, but the idea of the way in which an quote unquote intelligence, if the how, intelligence and learning itself evolves. And there's often this argument that, and I always think of my grandmother because she was from the time they usually start with that, her era, and it was a lot of memorization. So
Mm.
my grandmother could recite, um, it's one of Rudyard Kipling's things. And, that was just, she was born in 1911. So when she was a kid and went to school, there was a lot of memorization. And then, that's going to shift. And, then you get library, a lot of emphasis with, because people began to have access to books, right? Not necessarily needing to memorize, but you still had to know, say how to use a library, right?
Yeah.
How to use the system, the library system, how to locate information. And I often feel like it's people that are trying to be like tech apologists, right?
Right.
They're philiac people who have these, in my view, ridiculous fantasy about what's going on. But so they try to justify, like you're pointing out, that a lot of young people today, not only do they not actually have any knowledge inside here that they can just
Right.
access, they also lack the ability to sustain attention and focus for a very long amount of time. And I don't know what the most recent research is, but it's pretty sad.
Right.
I don't know.
And
I think it's
also, uh, uh,
seconds, honestly, 45
right.
seconds or 75 seconds or something. Um,
And and
so I
and that
mean,
that that range, that amount is also contracting quite fast. So
right. And Heidegger himself said merely having access to information, right?
yeah,
That passage. Merely having access to information is not the same
yeah.
as learning,
I was
and
I was also thinking when he says hard, I was also thinking about the difference, the felt difference of downloading an ebook and reading the ebook as opposed to struggling to find a book, going places, finally getting that book,
right.
bringing it home, and
Mhm.
spending time with that book, like
Right.
and keeping it like close to heart as a precious thing, which we
Right.
got through so much struggle. There's a big difference between how we are treating books in these two instances. A direct download, you just download it and keep it in some folder in the computer, which we don't even remember where it is, as opposed to this kind of ceremoniously, uh,
Right.
engaging with the book. And I think
Right.
that, um, yeah, our approach to knowledge, in a very
Right.
obvious sense, I mean, these things can be discussed even at a deeper level, but in this even more obvious sense, it has become completely technologized, and therefore also then the distinction of meditative and
Hmm.
calculative thinking or reading or all that comes into play in what
Right.
Heidegger is saying about guardianship. And I really like that word, wardship and guardianship
Uh-huh.
of,
Right.
of knowledge.
And
Yes.
I thought of the term desacralized,
Mm,
right?
mm.
um, books as sacred or a book as sacred to it, and again, very individual, right? This is ontological pluralism and the uniqueness of the individual. And I've known different people for whom, each one might have had one or two or three books that they felt very, very
Yes.
powerfully about.
Yes.
And, you ragged copies, where you could tell they have held it so many times. And then, maybe they had pristine copies as well. But so
So,
yeah, that's the state book is sacred. I don't know that you can ever claim a PDF file.
no, it just
I
is.
mean,
It's phenomenologically different. The experience is
right,
so different. Not because
right,
we can't read it or it's not clear.
right,
It's even engaging. Even that is not the point, right? We
right,
can, and we can remember what's. The point is, deeper, the point is that the engagement with knowledge loses that sacredness that you mentioned,
Mhm.
that it becomes easy. Uh,
It's a devotion.
yes, it should be. It should be.
Yeah,
But
right,
so the person who reads one book or a few books with a lot of love is much more learned, holds much more knowledge than a person
right,
who's reading 10 books randomly on the
right,
iPad every week. I mean,
right. And retaining nothing.
nothing.
And
Yeah, just knowing the names of the books at the end of the day. So it's much more important to focus on yeah, this taking to heart of
mhm,
knowledge. So very relevant stuff,
right.
what Heidegger is saying, I think.
And so the heart thing, it's just occurring to me. So, right, back to the Legain, the Noyen Legain, we've got the heart and the mind, we've got this
Hmm.
lordship, guardianship. And when we were talking before about scenting as a divination, um, the way in which, you know, I think, we brought up the way, different, I think of different phrases people use. Obviously, I'm talking about English, but, um, they might say, my gut just told me something was wrong, or I could sense that something was wrong, or something felt amiss, or what have you. Um, how it's
And
possible that, we could just say that really all those things are pointing to this notion of scenting, but again, it can occur or unfold for the individual not as a fully conscious
yes,
um, experience, but something they are conscious of, at least in terms of the legain that's generated, right? The words and the thinking. I used to give examples to students, like when I try to teach about what Aristotle's, there's Aristotelian intuition, right?
mm,
That which can't be proven and from which thinking begins, right? And then the common way people use the word intuition, right? And just to get them thinking about how those things might or might not intersect. um an example, people have it. I mean, most people, I think, will say something like they've had this weird experience where they'll say something like, I just had an intuition that
mm,
I should go check on my mom, right?
mm.
Or or whatever, and then mom had fallen down the stairs, or the dog had got out of the yard, or you name it. um but yeah, so I think if those things could potentially all
Uh,
be understood as falling underneath what we're calling scenting in Heidegger's sense, right?
which he is then calling divination.
Absolutely,
So
because I mean, that line about, especially that line about this kind of divination is not the outer court before the gates of knowledge. It is the great hall where everything that can be known is kept concealed.
yes,
So it's concealed, but yet it's known because it's divined through
yes,
scenting. And
yes.
so I think that's like really important, because I think a lot of times,
And
especially with the Heidegger people, they want
right.
to use strict logical distinctions, and and I haven't really found anybody that wants to discuss that passage, honestly, like really, and I love that passage. Um, but to me, that's where the mystic or the mysterious is
And
relevant, right?
also and this would be like an invitation even to the logical people in Heidegger studies, is that when something different is to happen or some revolutionary change needs to be brought about, it is precisely those who can see what is not being seen, who can see before it happens, who can, I mean, these are the people who can bring in change. And so they are the
Right,
scenting ones. They are the divining
right,
ones in that sense. I was
right.
just looking at the Epstein thing. And one of the things that I noticed with the Epstein thing also is that um, many of the people who are really intelligent people who should have known better did not know better. So there are instances where you don't know better, and logic does not give you that better knowledge. It's something else that you have to keep those eyes open. And
Right.
so there are
Right. And
many.
I think, I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for those people. I'm just thinking of, common kinds of occurrences where we do hear people say, I didn't act on that intuition.
We're right.
I
Yes.
should have went with my gut.
Right.
I
Right.
chose to ignore those flags.
Right.
Right. So I think sometimes there are um, decisions made for whatever reasons um, to ignore, if you will,
Yes.
the divination given,
Hmm.
and I think we should at least be open to this, exploring the question of, is it possible that if you choose to ignore the divination provided to you
Mhm.
by that scenting, does that sensibility or weaken? Do you lose it over time? I would argue yes, just because I'm an Aristotelian and I think habits
Right.
create what we
Right.
are.
And
And likewise the other. If
and
we pay attention, it gets better,
yeah,
right?
and the gut is so soft. It doesn't like enforce itself on you. It just
Right.
hints, and if you don't take it, it moves
Exactly.
on. It slinks away, if that's the word.
Whispers, maybe.
Yes,
You
and
could say it
and and
whispers.
once it's done the whispering, it goes away. And
Yep.
so it demands of you um, a lot of power to listen also. I mean, it
Hmm.
demands of you effort. And it is it is no wonder that people could sometimes ignore it because it is so soft. It speaks so softly. So that's another interesting thing
And the
about
other things are very loud,
other
right? I
things are
mean,
very loud, and therefore we go with the loud uh, promptings of reason and so on. Where in some
right,
cases it's good too, but its loudness sort of drowns the voice of this softer companion that we
right,
have, and we could risk losing if we don't
right.
attend to it,
Hmm.
him, her. Yes.
Right. And well, and I was going to say, because that goes with, um, the things that Heidegger says about the gods, for example, that they point and give signs. And, you think of Plato's, or excuse me, Socrates' daemon,
Hmm.
right? He wasn't loud and, but, and in fact, for Socrates, he only spoke up to tell Socrates, no, don't
No.
do it,
Yes,
right?
it's the
And,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
so, just that again, the way in which the intuition, or what we're scenting, to use Heidegger's terminology.
So
And then
what
you
was
said something about the way the people who could scent um, their role, right? And I immediately thought of, in the contributions, um, there's the future ones and the forerunners of the future ones. And
mm,
so it could be that the people capable of practicing scenting as divination, seeing what other people can't see, so to speak,
mm,
right?
mm.
That might have a very close relationship to who are the forerunners and the
Right,
future,
right,
right?
right. So how do you really read the notion of divination here? Is it is he using it in a metaphorical sense, or do you think he's actually talking about proper divination? What's your read on this? Because I sometimes think that, like Akeem was saying in that in the conference which we just presented in, he did say Akeem Albest, who teaches at
Mhm.
the University of New Mexico, um, he was saying something interesting. He said that we shy away from mentioning the divinities.
Mhm.
Um, And you did say that nobody really wants to discuss this passage. And the only way they would discuss it is if it were metaphorically explained.
Right.
So, what is Heidegger's own notion? I mean, what is Heidegger? Does he mean the divination in this case as an actual instance of divination, or is it
I think so. I
metaphorical?
actually think so. I think it does mean it in the way, and maybe I should be clear about what I mean by divination. So divining, like, whether I use tea leaves,
Hmm.
rune stones, tarot cards, I look at your palm, I touch your head, whatever. Um, s- Divining in the sense of accessing information, knowledge that is concealed
Yes.
from quote unquote most, if you will,
Oh, yeah.
or
So,
regular means. But I believe that that is actually right there in the passage.
mm,
Okay. When he says this is not right, this outer court, that we're not outside of it, we're actually in there, the great hall where all the knowledge is kept concealed.
right,
That's what it is to divine. I mean, divining rods. And again, divining, this notion of that we're somehow related to the divinities in some manner.
right.
Um, I mean, that's just how I understand divination in general, but I do think he means it that way.
Mm,
And I do think that a lot of people don't even want to discuss it
mm,
as far as Heidegger scholarship goes. We could talk about why. I think it's because one, it's a feminine art, or understood to be so, and it's non-rational or it's irrational, which I would claim in my book. It's in the realm of the non-rational. It's not rational or irrational. It's in the liminal space. Um, but in the On Poverty essay, where he talks about things Sophia as magical,
mm.
so I actually firmly believe that late Heidegger is a nature mystic. Um, I just have, you're not going to convince me otherwise. And he has some sense, ability for, and appreciation for that mystery, and that's why he emphasizes the importance and place of the mystery. So,
It's also interesting that this is really what he's getting at when he is trying to define what is thinking. I mean, it's an interesting idea
mhm,
that the whole point of the course of lectures that he's giving is that thinking is not just the sort of logic, positivistic
calculus,
kind of thinking, but there's this
calculus.
deeper
Oh,
dimension to
absolutely. I
that.
mean, I think that, sometimes, when I think about it, I'm like, wow, was he I like to have my little whatever, and I imagine him in his little hut, and he's like got his little lantern going, and he might have a cup of tea and read some tea leaves, and then he's like, let me see if I can try to convey, you know, what this is by, all these elaborate, and they're all wonderful to explore. I think we brought this up in our presentation, that there's a way in which you get to a point when you're looking at so many of his specific ideas and concepts and the texts that discuss them. So Gelassenheit, meditative thinking versus calculative thinking and Gestalt, dwelling in the fourfold, ontological pluralism as opposed to non, where it's kind of in a way all about the same thing.
Yes.
And so that's where I'm like, yeah, I do think that when what is called thinking, and maybe he's trying to build a ladder for people, a
Yes.
metaphor there, a ladder to, here's a step and here's a step and here's a step. And if you go spend some time outside, and if you learn how to sort of quiet down the calculative nonsense, that's why I said nature mystic, maybe you'll have a moment where something else occurs, and you then become, like he says, releasement and openness to the mystery grant
Mm.
us the possibility of
Mm.
dwelling in an entirely new way.
Right. And one also understands the concealed aspects in what is unconcealed, or one understands the the hidden in what is revealed, and the hiding that was necessary in revealing what is revealed.
Right.
So those aspects which are on the corners of a world of intelligibility, they are also centered out by this kind of divination, I think. And I think that you're right that the passage itself is saying all this. This is not like a extra or a forced reading of the passage. This is simply what the passage is saying. So in that sense, yeah, in that sense, it's surprising that this is not paid attention to as much as it should, given that thinking is such a important aspect in Heidegger's thinking, the concept of thinking. And if
Right.
if he's bringing this as an element in thinking, then it
Right.
needs to be paid attention to. It's not like a side note that he's making in this case.
Right.
So it's interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Something else just occurred to me too. So I know I've used the phrase in publications and in presentations. Certainly Ian Thompson, probably maybe you and other people, and it may even be uh, translated as such straight out of the Heidegger in various places. Okay, but here's the idea. So again, it's the notion of aletheia and captured as any unconcealment has concealment at its heart.
Yes.
Just that statement.
Hmm.
Any unconcealment has concealment at its heart. And so I just now, in the
The
moment,
heart.
realized, wow, exactly, connecting it with what he said about the heart and the mind. Because I think a lot of times when you try to talk about aletheia, concealment, unconcealment, certainly even when I try to teach it to students, there's this way in which also, I think people get the phenomenon noumena. They want to say, okay, well, here's the realm of the unconcealed,
Yeah.
uh, and the concealed is over there. And I'm like, no, I think that
Yeah.
that phrase about unconcealment has concealment at its heart shows you that what's concealed is right there
Right.
in the
Right. Right.
unconcealed.
It's
And so
it's
going back
it
to that passage, right?
right.
That this kind of thinking, scenting as divination, puts us right there in the court where
Yes.
all the knowledge is.
Right.
Okay.
And also I think that the general understanding is that once science and rationality and so on start progressing, um, concealment will be conquered, as though it's somewhere outside for it to be
Right,
conquered. But rather, what
right.
Heidegger is saying is that concealment is not only at the heart of unconcealment, it's even the condition. It's
Exactly.
in fact the enabling factor
Exactly.
in all
It
unconcealment. Right.
exactly. It's the nothing or the abyss or the void from which all things arise and to
Yes.
which all things return. And I could be wrong, but I do sometimes get a sense that um at least on the part of some people, the resistance to these ideas in Heidegger, not necessarily consciously, but perhaps unconsciously, are a bit misogynistic. That any notions about mystery,
Yeah.
divination, magic, that's witchcraft,
Hmm.
right? That's the middle dark ages, and it's really unfortunate.
And the more
Um,
masculine coded forms of knowledge are system building. It's like building a
right,
house with your
right,
with
right.
your
As Ian
yeah.
Ian pointed it out. I meant to bring it up to you when we did our presentation in his comment section. I don't know if you caught that because I had quoted what Heidegger said about reason was the stiff-necked adversary of
Yes.
thinking, and
Yes.
then he said, "Yeah, did you catch that? That's very phalangocentric,
Yes.
right?
He
Yeah."
yes, yes,
And
yes.
I was like, "Oh, that's wonderful. Like I'm gonna have to use that."
Right,
But
absolutely.
yeah, and
Hmm.
so again, this is where so many relevant things come in, like the binaries, the false binaries and dichotomies. Um, this
Yeah.
the failure to see things as the spectrum. And so yeah, I mean, because I don't feel like you could be, I mean, this is just me in my view. I don't think a person can be genuinely, authentically invested in understanding Heidegger unless they want to say, well, I'm only caring about being in time.
Yeah, that's
Hey,
the way out of
like
this.
there's that you're not going to escape his emphasis with this stuff, this the mystery, the Lozanite,
Yeah.
and you got to at least be open to the
Mm.
thinking on it,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Um,
Otherwise, you're doing a disservice to Heidegger and the reading of Heidegger if you
you're
don't.
it's the ontotheological metaphysics of Heidegger
Heidegger
scholars.
scholarship. Yes, yes. Which is real, by the way. There is that
Yeah,
ontological
right.
element to Heidegger scholarship. Yes. So that's all interesting. So basically, scenting, divination, and how all this is part of a history which is ontological, yes, but also misogynistic and so on.
Hmm.
And yeah, these are interesting ideas to pursue also in our
Right,
book. I think should be
right.
these should be addressed. I think these are really interesting. So yeah, mm,
Yeah. So that was some good stuff.
yeah. So what did you think about the the presentation and the conference and uh,
Yeah, it was good.
everything?
Um,
Yeah.
I I tend towards like self-critical, like and I don't even really like to go back and listen to any recordings or anything, but it's only because I felt like I spent time trying to lay out the basics, and so I did say some things I wanted to say, but I didn't get to go into depth.
Mm.
Your part, on the other hand, I was especially pleased with. So I was glad. I was like, well, I went first and then he like really did something great. But the Q&A part was good. We
I
had
thought our
a few,
discussion before the Q&A was also really good.
yeah, and I
And
think
it was
some people liked that are a little back and forth. Um,
because
but
that's new in like that's new in conferences. Nobody does that
It's
in a
kind of funny
conference.
too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really, it's kind of funny that it's not a thing because I'm like, we all are fed as philosophical babies,
Yeah.
right? The
Socratic dialogue.
dialogues,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So
And so Akeem was saying that, oh yeah, it's so nice that you all had a conversation and now we are invited to this conversation.
yeah,
That was a
yeah,
nice
that was
thing.
good.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it was nice. It was nice.
Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, so I thought that was good, and if we're still on that track next year and we present again, then I do want to be able to, take it further.
Oh, by then we would just be presenting from our book, right?
Book, hopefully, or at least from the manuscript,
Yeah,
right? So
manuscript. Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah. Um,
So
but
then that wouldn't require too much. Um, I mean, the writing would have already been done, so it would be a
right,
much easier. I mean, there's no extra
right.
work for that
I
conference as
do
well.
think though that we've come up with geez, I'd have to go through my notes, but I'm pretty sure we've come up with like at least 10 or 12
Chapters.
other directions. And so I do feel like we're gonna have to like put a limit on ourselves because I personally would rather write the first book as a reasonable length and then
Yeah.
write a second one and a
Yeah,
third one.
yeah. But I think that people are into it. They do
Yeah,
want to hear us
yeah,
discuss these things. So I think the book would be nice. It would be a good I think it will be well received. I have this
yeah.
scent or intuition
Right. And
that
I do, yeah, totally. And I do think you're the tarrying, the whiling, it goes can be linked up nicely also with the scenting.
yes, I think
Because
so.
again, whatever we're talking about, like whether we're talking about, scenting in the sense of, just taking a walk outside or making a decision during our work day or what have you.
Yes.
Um, I think that might be a prerequisite, if you will, at least
Yeah.
having reached a attunement or comportment, a way of being where we can and do consciously slow down.
Yes.
Um, Certainly, I know this comes up in a lot of other contexts, when even when, like, if somebody goes to like an anger management, or if they read a book about
Yeah.
it,
Yeah. Why not?
will
Yes,
tell you about,
indeed.
take so many breaths before you respond.
Yes.
um
Yes. I think,
or social media, don't just type out whatever comes to
right,
your head.
right,
Like,
right. Break your, stop for a second
yeah,
and then. So
exactly.
I think it has like a common meaning on an everyday level, but it also has that deep metaphysical meaning, or a meaning that goes all the way down to the history of, or all the way down to this question of ontological pluralism, ontological metaphysics, and so on. So it has uh, that elevated meaning, but it also has common quotidian meanings of, like you said,
Right.
anger management programs insisting, or using this as a tactic, as a strategy to control one's anger, is to wait for 10
Hmm.
seconds, so on. That is also to tarry. And
Right.
yeah,
And they do it with other things. I'm just thinking about different programs where the basic goal is to change habits. So whether it's, you want to smoke a cigarette, right, because you're trying to break that habit,
mhm,
or you have a tendency to eat too much chocolate or whatever, and the ways in which it usually does involve at least this sort of decision to consciously, recognize it, the
yeah,
impulse or the compulsion, and to take a step back.
right,
And sometimes, with almost anything at all like that, I
right,
think you can find that the pause alone can be enough for the energy to redirect somehow.
right.
Um,
And for insight to also develop, like once
right.
one pauses, and then I think I understand tarry as a lingering in that pause. Like tarrying is
Uh-huh.
also a kind of a extended action. So it's pausing, but then
Right.
staying in that
Totally.
pause,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Ye-
Tarrying. Well,
yes.
see, I was about to say that something I began doing, it wasn't like a decision to do it. It started happening. And then I, quickly realized, wow, okay, I like this. I'm going to continue to do this. And it was, if something I felt passionately about, on Facebook, somebody said something, and my impulse to always act like I'm in a classroom. What I've started doing, not all the time, but sometimes, is I will go ahead and type out my response, and then I just erase it and delete it. And it's, interestingly enough, that kind of goes with what you just said, because it's a pause, but I tarry with my thinking. I tarry with the issue and the problem. I
Yes.
compose. I gather my own thoughts, compose, and then I just simply erase it.
Mhm.
Because I, often determine that, I, this isn't going to matter, first of all, to the person, or, I don't have the time today to be arguing. Um, but yeah, so that's
Yeah.
just a little
True.
thing.
Yeah. And
Journaling.
also, it's also interesting in that what you read about letting something lie,
Mm-hmm.
that's also a form of tarrying. So just
Right,
let things be is the idea. And so
right,
when we tarry, we are also gaining insight about entities, and that's what everything is doing.
right,
So,
right,
so to stop or to pause and to linger in that pause is to imitate being in some sense.
right,
So,
right,
um, so just like we have imitatio Christi, this is kind of like imitatio essendi, I guess. I mean that we
right.
are we are trying to imitate being because being tarries and it
Mm.
shifts, it shape shifts after tarrying for
Right,
some time. And if it tarries for a while, like Plato's ideas, it will later tarry like energeia in Aristotle. It will, but in its real sense, it is a pure case of letting lie. It just
Mhm.
It's just this pure
Right,
allowing, And
right,
Heidegger says that also in the Letter on Humanism, where he describes being as sheer enablement
right.
or sheer letting. That's what being is.
It's
Being,
also love, right? He
yes.
says love is to let a being unfold in its essence.
So
So,
being is in that sense love also,
exactly,
right?
exactly,
So
right.
yeah, so to tarry is also to know, because you're
Hmm.
knowing what being is like and you're knowing it in a very different way, not through
Right,
reading a book of philosophy, but by tarrying, you know that being tarries, and
right,
you know its mode of being from the inside in some sense. I don't know. I mean, not that it is an entity or a super
right,
being or something like that, but
right.
yeah.
It
So,
does bring to mind, I want to say, like certain literary characters, certain characters maybe in a movie here or there,
hmm,
or uh, a character in a story from Buddhism or Taoism. But the all of these characters that I'm thinking of, right? They all share this sort of like they don't rush,
yeah, yes,
right? They,
yeah,
they, they just don't, and they may linger or tarry
yeah,
for a very long time. Um, and the idea being that that there's really isn't a reason to be otherwise,
yes.
right? Because there's some understanding that's been reached, right? Such that,
Right.
you know,
Such that the rose can be without wife, kind of, Uh,
right.
which Rainer Schurman in one of his or Rainer Schurman in one of his essays, articles on this, on letting be, which is also just the translation for Gelassenheit.
Mhm.
Um, I think releasement misses the point as a translation. It comes from the word lassen, which means to let. So Gelassenheit is simply the to let be, as in a
Uh-huh.
positive sense. So um, Schurman says that what happens when we live in that mode is that we break from the clutches of teleocracy. He calls it
Mm,
teleocracy. The
nice.
the
Oh, that's a
telos,
great term.
yeah,
Yeah,
the telos ruling you.
right.
But you have to break that, and then you're free to have telos. But you should not be under a teleocratic regime, basically.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, because oh yeah, I wish I would have had that term from you before our presentation because that actually came up at some point. I said something about there is no telos,
Right,
um,
right.
when we're talking,
Or
talking.
or there is a telos, but it's not teleocratic in the sense that it
Right,
doesn't it doesn't it doesn't rule you throughout.
right,
It's not allowed to do that. It's so once one breaks the clutch of teleocracy, then a telos can be freely instituted, or one can have a free
right.
relationship to telos. But
Mhm.
yeah, so that's
Yeah,
what.
it was the devotional polytheism definition is where I
Yes,
was, the
yes,
boundarylessness of being, there is no,
and
but I like that. I like that.
polytelos also. There's a
Right. Okay.
there's a possibility of either having or respecting
Hmm.
multiple telos that people and societies have. So
Hmm.
you can do that only when your telos hasn't become so universal in its rule over you that you
Right.
you see everything else as a waste of life, a waste of time. There are people like that who go around thinking that everyone is simply wasting their lives except
Right.
themselves. So they are
Right.
being ruled by this telos, which is
Right.
very
And so
different.
maybe in that way, maybe for some anyway, the first step is to just be no telos until they can
Yes.
recognize that the telos they've been pursuing are the teleocratic ones,
Mm,
right?
yes,
And then be,
absolutely.
released into another way of being where poly how did you put it?
Polytelos. I don't know if that
Polytelos.
I don't know if
Yeah.
that works in the Greek sense, but I think that the first part of not having telos is in a way the initial aim of existentialism, the idea
Right.
of breaking predetermined projects
Right.
so that
Mhm.
new projects can be created
Right.
by us, our own lives. So I think this
Right.
idea of breaking with the teleocracy was the initial impulse of existentialism too. That there's no meaning. Life is meaningless. That's how they say.
Right.
And it sounds so negative, but
Right.
there is a positive element to that. They're saying that
Well,
life,
right, because then you can create the meaning, right?
yes,
And so I always try to tie that to, for students, it's an allegory of the cave where I say, the really here, think of it this way. It's a real freedom is a two-step process. Step one, you have to get free from
so
because there's
true.
so much that's already been put on you.
Yes,
So much ideas, beliefs, values, etc.
yeah,
And so step one is get free from. So that would be sort of the institution of no telos so as to break free from the
yes,
teleocracy. And then
yes,
step two is when you become free for
yes.
that which you authentically choose. And
Choose.
so there's the polytelos. That's
Yes.
where, now that you're free of teleocracy, you can freely figure out or just be open. And
And then you'll respect others who do that too, because
yes,
if you have a child and they don't want to be whatever the society says that you ought to be, the ought,
right,
you need to break from that teleocracy to allow them to also break
right.
from that teleocracy or respect it when they do that. Respect it when
Because
they,
that's love. That's
that's
love to
love.
let them
Right,
unfold in their essence.
right.
And so I
But
think
there are
in this
many,
way, we've just woven together the ontological pluralism,
and
the love, and the no teleocracy. Yeah.
yes, yes. And Rainer Schurman would be then an interesting conversation partner for us. But, there
Mm,
are many people who don't have the capacity or have not developed the capacity for respecting other people's ambitions. And
right.
not everybody's ambition would involve doing things that we recognize as useful or
Right.
utilitarian. So
Right.
people often, there's a lot of violence involved in not recognizing that other people have simply different understandings of what goals are. And
Right. Well, because Gestell has
yeah,
dictated
yes,
capitalism as
yes,
Gestell has dictated what is and isn't
a good
valuable.
goal. Yes,
That's why students will say, their parents thought they were crazy because they wanted to minor in philosophy. What are you going to
yes,
do with that?
and this especially uh, apparent. I mean, this part of what we are saying is mainly this kind of teleocracy is mainly imposed by parents on their children
Right.
because they
Mm,
because they one other thing is that they think that their children are part of their telos, that
mhm.
what my self fulfillment and my goal, my project includes
Right.
my children. And so
Which is
when
narcissism,
which is
which is absolutely
narcissism,
narcissism.
yes.
Yes.
And when they don't consider themselves part of our project,
Right.
and which is then seen as rebellion, then there's a lot of violence. I don't mean physical violence, but there's a lot of unnecessary psychological
Right.
harm which is done to,
Right.
to children who want to do other things.
Right.
And it
Um,
happens a lot in India. I don't know how it is in the US, but in India,
oh yeah.
I've heard in China and so on as well, there's so much, parents rely so much on their kids. They rely so much on their kids getting to the best universities and so on. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of pressure from parents,
Right.
you know. And I've heard
Yeah.
there's this it's a myth, but I don't know. It's a stereotype, but
Right.
the idea of going to medical school being the
Right.
biggest
Yeah, I
telos.
just saw a comedian who was an Asian person comedian, and he's making jokes about the exact same thing, though, and
Yeah, yeah,
it's noting it's very real, and oh, it was
very
very
real.
funny. It was about India. Yeah, now I remember. He said there's a hierarchy, um, and there's the doctor Indian,
Yes,
the engineer Indian, and
yes,
then there's the hotel Indian.
right,
And he said the lowest rung, which is what he was, his family was the gas station Indian.
right,
Right. He's talking
absolutely.
about Indians in
And,
America.
right,
And
and
but
all this
yeah,
figures into who you marry.
oh
Um,
yes.
it's a very
And it's
difficult.
it's sad really because so many people I mean, I'm sure some people are content, but I know there are people who are not happy. And you asked about America, and that stuff still goes on here. I don't know if as many people get to be, go for the being doctors and engineers, but certainly there's an emphasis on money. All right.
Oh
So,
yeah,
you know, you better, unfortunately, I think a lot of people, the family is such that they don't really care how the child is making money so long as they give the appearance of success. All right. So
yeah,
I do think there's a lot of corruption, a lot of bad things that go on. Um, by whatever means, whether it's exploiting workers or straight up embezzling money. I mean, people are obsessed
mm,
with material acquisition and the appearance of it, right?
right.
So
That's the
certain
big
things.
that's the
uh,
big telos with the capital T,
oh yeah,
money.
and it's sad and disgusting,
It's
and
also
but even with kids, they want, if it's a son, my son is an athlete. I
right.
swear to you, that has been like the obsession my whole life that I've noticed with boys and males. That and I always felt terrible because it was clear that certain boys were far more artistically inclined, musically
But those
inclined.
things are seen as feminine.
Yeah, there you go, there you
So
go. And so,
so boys who
they
are not it's like a boy who's not out there on the playground, but is rather writing poetry in his
right,
library. He'll be
right,
picked on. He'll be seen as
right.
effeminate. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's yeah, because
So,
and also because in a way, in this case, the father has a lot of his own worth is tied up with how
oh
his
yeah.
child is. So there's a lot of worth issues happening here.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's all on the dad. The dad has psychological problems that he has never
Yeah,
dealt with, and he himself probably didn't achieve what he thought he should, even if he is successful in some way. And so again, it's narcissism because the child, the son, the male child, is now a narcissistic extension of the father,
yeah.
right? And this is just part
And
of
that's
culture.
a and that's such a big burden to give your child. You have to figure
Oh
this
yeah,
out. I couldn't, you have to do it for me because I don't live forever. This is my chance
right,
at eternity or an
right,
extra chance, one more chance.
right,
So
right,
so that's why the child becomes the sort of the project of the
right.
parent. And
And
if
in this
they
way, we could really critique Levinas, right? Because I mean, I love Levinas in a certain sense, but I think he's got some of this what I see as highly dysfunctional narcissism
mm,
in his philosophy with the paternity,
yes,
right?
the paternity. Yes,
Oh
he
my
doesn't
God.
see the
Yeah.
woman and the child. They're
Yeah.
two categories of humans that he does not consider to be fully other. And the
Right.
other in this meaning of other being not a negative meaning of otherizing, but the other
Right.
as the source of my responsibility.
Right.
But he
Right.
sees that as only a masculine thing. He
Yeah, it's
doesn't,
very patriarchal.
yeah,
It's
very
very
patriarchal.
patriarchal.
Yeah.
Um,
Which
but
is
yeah.
interesting because Heidegger is the one who is often politically questioned, but Levinas is
Right.
not. though Heidegger is much less patriarchal and so on than Levinas, but he gets most of the
Right.
yeah. But yeah, so the telos thing is also important. We could keep that
Yeah.
also as a yeah. And in a way, ontotheology also has this self-perpetuating logic to it, like the Father wanting to perpetuate himself.
Hmm.
Ontotheology also wants you to not know that it is one
Right.
of the contingent ways in which you can do things. There are other ways to do it. It wants you to not know that. So it also wants to perpetuate itself in that way. So interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously we're just talking about things like personality and you know, what a child may want to do with their life long term. And, that's not to say anything about a child's, sexuality
Oh
unfolding
yeah.
and,
Oh yeah.
the expectations there. I mean, in that way, parents are sadly quite often a child's first bullies.
Yes, and if it properly aligns with what the parents think is the right way to be, and so on. If they don't align properly, they become major bullies of the child. And the way they
Oh,
do it
yeah.
is also interesting. They project this as a being let down situation
Right.
where
Hmm.
where the child is the wrongdoer. You let me down by not
Right.
being what I wanted you to be
Hmm.
thing. And
And out of the other side of their mouth, they will sometimes say something like, it's this feigned concern for the ultimate happiness of the child,
it's for their
right?
own good.
You're never, I'm just worried about what'll, and it's just, yeah. Again, it's narcissism, it's utter selfishness. It's like it's not
The
love.
thing is,
It's just
sometimes,
not love.
yes, but sometimes the children also don't know what's happening to them because
Hmm.
they don't see. This is why the poly of polytheism of pluralism and so on. This is why the poly is important because once you know that there are multiple ways in which the parent
Yes.
student or parent child relationship can take place, and once they know that there are other ways, then they will have a place to stand so that they can review what's happening to them. But often
Right.
people are given only this one, so they think that this is the natural way that
Right.
parents should be
Right.
with kids. And they
Right. Oh,
just,
well, I mean, that's every child, right? I mean, myself included, I had to reach a certain point in existence before I realized that what I had took to be normal
yeah,
was just what was true in my household of origin, right? That
yes.
that didn't necessarily happen in other places.
Hmm.
But yeah. So,
That's why I also think that people who sometimes, I mean, this idea of homeschooling, which is good, I see what, but sometimes it's important to for them to go out and see
oh yeah.
so that the home doesn't become the only space where everything is happening. I mean,
Right.
there's the risk there's a lot of risk in that, but I think it's important that they are given that
Right.
experience of
Right.
the
Because the home, and often it's the home and church,
yeah.
it's the cave.
Yes,
They're
it's
in a
the cave.
cave.
Yes, yes,
And
absolutely. Absolutely.
um, so
Have you seen um it's actually a really horrible documentary. Keep Sweet and Obey is the name of the so it's
no.
about the fundamentalist Mormon church
Oh no.
and
I'll have to see it.
it's
I mean,
on
you mean it's
Netflix.
awful, like not worth watching, or it's just
It's
awful because of what it
good.
showed?
It's good,
Okay.
but what it is showing is so awful that
Oh
I
yeah.
have never seen anything like that in terms of mind control and uh,
Oh yeah.
and I know
Mm,
why, and I can see why they want to be in a separate um
right.
in like a disconnected space They will,
Right.
I mean, this is often the case with American religious communities, especially American, because they often would frame all this as a form of freedom
Right.
of religion. But what they are
Right.
really doing is giving their people no other alternative
Right.
possibilities. And
It's a cult.
it's a
It's a
cult.
cult.
Yes, yes. And
Yeah.
it's worse than the normal LDS church, the FLDS church, the fundamentalist Church of the Latter-day Saints, and so on. It's much more um, cultish, but also in the sense of what I mean is the top leadership know what they're doing is
Right.
will not be accepted by anybody, including the people that we are manipulating. So we have to keep them
Right.
unexposed, and
Right.
it's really horrible.
It's
The
diabolical, honestly.
Yeah,
It's
and the
malevolent.
things that they do to women, um,
Mhm.
including minors, and the whole idea of polygamy, how that has a negative impact on women. I mean, all those things are brought out really well in that series of I think 6 episodes, I guess, but it's
Yeah.
really worth watching.
Okay, I put it on my list.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice. Polly
Well,
Theos.
yeah, that's great. And so maybe we should wrap up this one
Okay.
and we can do another soon,
Hmm.
maybe a bit more structured, or look at some specific texts.
Okay. I
But I
thought,
just thought that, we could do some of these here and there
yeah,
where it's a little bit free form, obviously
we,
try to relate to our overarching themes,
right,
right?
we can call it dialogues or something like that, maybe.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, yeah, okay. So we could,
So we can say
so we can say
goodbye to the
goodbye.
viewers.
Yes.
Like and subscribe,
Like and
right?
subscribe,
So,
and
yeah,
we'll also post the link to the recent presentation that we did um, on our channel as well. We'll post a link to it. It's not up yet, but it should be soon.
right. Yeah.
So stay tuned. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.